My stories were not so much stories, but there's two companies, David, that I think are pretty interesting. One's convey.com, and I don't know how you actually pronounce it. It's convai.com. And there's this is one of those interesting two sides of a coin thing here. So my understanding is Convey is an AI engine that basically allows you to build NPCs in gaming environments, but NPCs that are running with an AI behind them. So I think, if you've dealt with an NPC in a video game and they sort of say the same thing, you can get them to say the same lines. And I'm probably portraying my age because the last NPCs that I interacted with a lot in a video game were probably in Zelda. So that gives you some idea. But
don't worry, they're still making those games.
Yeah. Okay. So, but now you've got this kind of really kind of deep conversational AI. And so I think there's two things here. One, it sort of moves my prediction forward that we're about to live in Zombieland, right? Where, if you're playing a video game and it was compelling before because you were playing with your friends, and now the NPCs sound like your friends, or at least are able to, you actually have, people are having arguments with AI and trying to convince AI that, it's biased about abortion and things like that. And they're having legitimate conversations, at least that are legitimate in the sense that they're entertaining on the other end. If you can imagine doing that in a video game with an NPC, all of a sudden your ability to immerse yourself in a world that's not real becomes much more significant, and that can be a bit scary. On the other hand, I was looking at this and thinking, if you're out there and you're the kind of person that looks at Lowe's and says, "Look at all the possibilities," I think there's some really interesting possibility to create stories, and maybe in games and stuff with these NPCs. And you don't have to be, to your point, David, you don't have to be this massive programmer to be able to make that work, right? I mean, now you just, you just use the AI. So.
Right. Yeah. And well, what's interesting is that you could look at some, for example, like big open world games where there has been a lot of focus over the years on trying to make the non-playable characters in the environment react as realistically as possible to the things that your character is doing, because ultimately your character in the game has like total free will and is probably pretty powerful, because that's just typically how games work. And can do all sorts of ridiculous things. And so the developers just do everything they can to just try to figure out how to make the non-playable characters react as realistically as possible to whatever is happening. And so now if they're able to have an AI where basically in the background you can just imagine them putting in a chat GPT prompt where it's just, you're an NPC, like a non-playable character in a video game. You see the main character suddenly jump to the top of a 10-story building. How do you react? And they react just like that. And so it can create some really interesting possibilities for that. But to your point, it could also make it so realistic that we're talking about getting closer to Ready Player One, frankly.
Right. And there's an interesting aspect here where there's, the gaming application of this is pretty interesting, but on the site for Convey or whatever it is the conversational AI for virtual worlds, add unlimited knowledge to make your character an expert. And what's interesting is they have an avatar, but looks like a nurse here. And then the question, what is the best way to treat a fever? And the avatar is saying, the best way to treat a fever is to get plenty of rest, drink plenty of fluids, take over-the-counter medications, blah, blah. So, I mean, this is also an interesting piece where it's like, think of a Lowe's store where you have all these NPCs sitting on the thing, or maybe various pieces of NPCs, not to get too weird, sitting on the shelf. And now it's like, you can look at this and go, oh, great. Now there's no people to talk to. Only bots are going to be talking to me. Or you can look at that and say, oh, wow, there might be some really interesting ways we could help people. How could you, I'm wondering, David, if this is like, did an ancient storyteller at some point go, oh man, I used to be able to enrapture an audience with my tales of heroism and tragedy and love. And they would sit around the campfire and hang on my every word. And now they're all just sitting there with their noses buried in a book. What I mean? Like, because there's some aspect of that, right? I mean, like if you had to convey knowledge, or if there was a teacher, I used to keep in the Greek in Athens, I used to keep a class of students hanging on my every word as I, practice my high art of rhetoric and deliver this information to them. And now they're all just walking around with scrolls. There's this aspect of there's a loss of human interaction, right? If the only way for you and I to convey knowledge to people is to talk to them live and in person, well, that's a pretty high human interaction. But if we really want to take something that is really important and preserve it, we would write it down in a book. Well, that preserves it in a very interesting way, but it also unavoidably leaves out the human connection. My shelves, my walls are full of books of people that I've never seen in person, wouldn't recognize if I tripped over them, and I've never had a conversation with, and yet I've learned and been able to benefit from their knowledge. It's interesting to think of, like, would an NPC be a book? Like you put all your knowledge into a book, and now it's almost an interactive book that your, descendants, other people could get your knowledge out of. That might be an interesting way to think of AI as a repository of information rather than some scary, Skynet thing. But the second thing I looked at, again, not a news story, was and again, I don't know why. I guess all the good names are taken, but Lalamu Studio, Lalamu, Lamu Studio.
Close enough.
Yeah, close enough. This is a little bit freaky. You can take pictures of anything and you can upload it here. You can then take audio of anything, and then you can make the picture save the audio. And when I say picture, I mean, like, you can take a picture of a painting and the painting will all of a sudden have animated lips. You can take a picture of a doll and the doll will now have animated lips. And it will say whatever it is. And of course, there's some really wild stuff here where they've got like Bart Simpson, and Homer Simpson, and then take a picture of the doll, and now the doll's talking like Homer Simpson. The site's pretty interesting to play around with. But again, there's some really interesting two sides of the coin, like, hello, deep fake on command. I could take a picture of David. Somebody could take a picture of our podcast, David, a still picture pulled from a YouTube still. And then it can make you Bart and me Homer, and we would be able to say whatever they said, and our lips would move and look like it. Now, this particular studio at the moment, it's not hard to tell. I mean, it's enough to suspend disbelief.
It's enough to make you do a double take for a second, right? But then you're like, okay.
Yeah, but you can see there's a little bit of syncing problems and a little bit of blurriness that you can sort of see. This is, but it's for entertainment. It's not enough to actually make you think that David sounds like Homer Simpson, but it would be enough to be pretty entertaining. So that's one side. The other side is, I mean, this is fascinating, right? You could take two dolls, you could set them up, or you could take two puppets, or you could take just whatever. You could take two pictures, you could paint a picture, set them up, stick a camera on them, then run some audio, maybe even have AI generate some stuff, and then all of a sudden your people could be talking. So the other side of this is you don't need a movie studio to provide to create some pretty compelling scenes at the moment. And if you're out there and you see the Lowe's store as, all of a sudden, instead of having to be a $40 million studio executive in Hollywood, I literally can start creating stuff that Hollywood can barely dream about almost for free. It kind of changes the game a little bit. So I don't know, David, are you about to take some pictures of some dolls and get into the movie making business here? So
I don't think so, but what this makes me think of is just all of the young kids out there, and just like the students who are just interested in getting into some kind of filmmaking or storytelling, but are, they can't afford high-end film equipment, or they don't have friends to cast in acting roles or anything like that, but they have a computer where they could use some of these tools, and they could start out doing that. We've seen, you can, look up stories online of kids who just make unique, like stop motion or just interesting little concept short films just on YouTube, just in their spare time. And then suddenly movie studios and executives take notice of just the talent that you can develop just with your home computer, with the resources that you have. And suddenly you're able to jump into the industry just because of what you're able to to learn at home if you're willing to take the initiative to do it. The most recent example of that is in the most recent Spider-Man movie, Across the Spider-Verse, which is just an absolutely gorgeous movie, just with the way that it's animated. There is a short scene, probably like 30 seconds or so, that is Lego stop motion. And the way that that was done is that it was actually a young kid that took the entire trailer for the first movie, and he stop motion animated the entire thing by himself out of Lego. And so then the creators of the movie saw it and they loved it so much that they had him do an entire scene for the next movie. And I'm sure that he got paid a ton of money to be able to do that. And so I can, only just think of if there are some young people out there who are able to figure out how to creatively use some of this stuff, then they could really be pushing forward some really cool new ways to tell stories and to really have some cool opportunities out of them.
Well, it's an interesting thing. I mean, I think it's entirely possible now. There's a lot of people out there who have been doing stop motion videos with Legos for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
This software would make your minifigs talk, man. So, if to combine it with that, and all of a sudden your minifigs are going to talk with lips that look compelling enough to suspend disbelief since you're looking at a bunch of minifig Lego players anyhow. I mean, like it's, we're not looking like photorealistic stuff.
I mean, at that point, you're literally just like competing with the Lego movie.
Right. And so I think that there's some really fascinating opportunities there. So young storytellers out there, and we've talked about this at conventions and conferences. I've talked to this with when I've been speaking and talking to people. Look, there's going to be a divide, and we've used this analogy before, but to me, this feels an awful lot like the late '90s, early 2000s as the internet started to arrive. Mid '90s and late '90s as the internet started to arrive in storm. Right? There's going to be a divide of three things here. There's going to be the people who don't adapt. And they're going to increasingly find themselves completely disenfranchised from the world. And then some of them will stay disenfranchised and some of them will sort of reintegrate when the usability becomes so high. So I noticed this, that there's a generation about my parents' age where some of them never got comfortable with the internet and technology. And some of them came back when the iPad and the iPhone came out because all of a sudden Apple made the interface so easy that anybody could do it. Right. So that's one aspect. There's people who will adapt enough to do whatever it is they have to do. And I've generally been in this camp, right? I can use technology, but I've never been fascinated by it. So I can use and master what's in front of me and I can figure it out and I'm willing to figure it out, but generally to accomplish an end, it's a means to an end. And so I'll use it for my job. I'll use it for whatever I'm doing. But then there's another group, and that's the group that says, that's cool. And they start jumping on it early and they start going, what could you do with this? Those are the people, if the first group of people are the ones that are like, I'm going to call a plumber, they'll go to Lowe's to get my stuff. Right. And the second group of people is like, okay, I need a pipe. I'm going to buy a pipe and I'm going to get it and go back in and put the pipe in. And then the third group is the people that look at Lowe's and go, I wonder if you took this pipe and attached it to that over there and added that over here and did something in a new way, if you wouldn't need to do this stuff anymore this way. That's it. That's the third group. And if you're a younger person listening to this, or you're a parent of a younger person listening to this, look, there is this is that kind of place where the bar for entry is real low all of a sudden. The tools are real available. And if you're willing to jump in and start messing around, you're likely to be in the driver's seat for this technology in the next 5 years. And so that's an exciting turn. Thanks for listening to this clip. If you want to check out the rest of this episode, as well as our other full episodes, you can do so on the channel.